You need to move your vehicle, sir, right now. Officer, I'm waiting on my daughter. We have an appointment at this dealership. I said move it. This lot isn't for loitering. You don't belong here. I belong exactly where I am. And you may want to reconsider how you're handling this. Is that a threat? Get out of the vehicle. Now. My credentials are in my jacket. Would you like to see them before this goes any further? The dealership's parking lot security camera captured everything that happened at 11:23 a.m. on a Saturday in March in Naperville, Illinois. A well-dressed black man in his mid-40s sat in a late-model silver SUV outside Prestige Motors, waiting. He was calm. He was patient. He was early for an 11:30 appointment to buy his daughter her first car, a moment he had been planning for months. Officer Dale Pruitt had been with the Naperville Police Department for 11 years. He had 9 complaints in his personnel file, 8 of them involving traffic stops or confrontations with black men. His supervisors had noticed the pattern. They'd given him counseling, a few written warnings, some refresher training, but they had never done what they should have done. They had never stopped him. That Saturday morning, Pruitt spotted the silver SUV in the dealership lot and made the decision that would end his career. He didn't know that the man behind the wheel was Marcus Webb, a 17-year veteran of the Drug Enforcement Administration, a decorated federal agent, and a father with nothing on his mind but surprising his daughter with a set of car keys. What happened over the next 22 minutes would trigger a federal investigation, cost the city of Naperville $1.4 million, result in criminal charges, and send Dale Pruitt to federal prison. Every single second of it was being recorded. Before we go any further, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or state in the comments below. And if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. This story gets much more intense, and you are absolutely going to want to see how it ends. Marcus Webb had spent 17 years with the Drug Enforcement Administration. Before joining the DEA, he spent 6 years as a narcotics detective with the Chicago Police Department, where he was named Officer of the Year twice and received a commendation for his role in dismantling one of the largest fentanyl distribution networks in the city's history. He had gone undercover. He had testified in federal court. He had worked cases that put away cartel lieutenants and corrupt officials alike. By the time he was sitting in that parking lot in Naperville, Marcus was a senior special agent who supervised a team of 12 investigators. He had been shot at. He had survived 2 attempts on his life during undercover operations. He had navigated situations that would make most people's blood run cold. He knew the law, he knew his rights, and he knew, better than almost anyone, exactly what proper police procedure looked like. That Saturday, Marcus Webb had one simple goal: buy his daughter Amara a car. She had just turned 19, was heading into her sophomore year of college, and had been borrowing her mother's car for the better part of a year. Marcus had done the research, found a certified pre-owned Honda Accord at Prestige Motors with low mileage and a clean history, and made the appointment 2 weeks earlier. He had texted Amara to meet him there at 11:30. He arrived a few minutes early, parked his SUV near the entrance, and sat there scrolling through his phone while he waited for his daughter. He was wearing dark slacks, a button-down shirt, and a light jacket. He had a coffee in the cup holder and a printout of the vehicle listing folded on the passenger seat. Nothing about the scene was unusual. Nothing about Marcus Webb suggested anything other than exactly what he was: a father waiting for his daughter in a car dealership parking lot on a Saturday morning. Dale Pruitt was not assigned to the Prestige Motors lot that morning. He was on routine patrol in the area when he pulled into the dealership driveway, ostensibly to run a check on vehicles in the lot, a practice his department permitted but did not require. His body camera was on, something he almost certainly forgot within the first 30 seconds of what happened next. Pruitt's patrol camera recorded him slowing down as he passed the silver SUV. He circled the lot once, came back, and parked his cruiser directly behind Marcus's vehicle, blocking him in. Then he got out. His approach was everything his training said not to do. Hand near his belt, jaw set, eyes already hard. He walked up to the driver's side window without any greeting, without identifying himself, and without any explanation for the stop. He tapped the glass with one knuckle. Marcus rolled down his window. "You need to move your vehicle, sir, right now." Marcus was confused. He looked around at the lot. He told Pruitt calmly that he had an appointment at the dealership and was waiting for his daughter. Pruitt didn't acknowledge the explanation. He repeated his demand. When Marcus asked what the reason was, Pruitt told him the lot wasn't for loitering. Marcus looked at the dealership sign directly above them and asked, with measured patience, whether a customer waiting for an 11:30 appointment could be considered loitering at a car dealership. Pruitt didn't answer that question. Then he asked the one that told Marcus everything he needed to know. "What exactly are you doing in this neighborhood?" The question landed in the air between them like a declaration. Not which dealership, not what kind of car, not how long he'd be parked there. This neighborhood. The implication was unmistakable and deeply insulting. Marcus had been a law enforcement professional for 23 years. He had trained himself to stay controlled in situations far more dangerous than this one. But he recognized the question for exactly what it was. He answered it plainly. He was buying his daughter a car, and he would be going inside when she arrived. Pruitt asked for his license and registration. Marcus, hands visible on the wheel, asked what traffic violation he had committed that justified the stop. Pruitt said he'd explain once Marcus complied. Marcus told him evenly that he was happy to cooperate with a lawful request, but would appreciate knowing the basis for it. This exchange, and the fact that a black man was asserting his legal rights rather than simply complying without question, seemed to visibly agitate Pruitt. His voice went up. He straightened to his full height. He told Marcus he could make this very simple or very complicated. What he had no way of knowing was that inside the dealership, a sales manager named Kevin Park had already noticed the confrontation in the lot through the showroom window and had started filming on his phone. The dealership's external security cameras were also capturing every angle. And Marcus's daughter, Amara, had just pulled into the lot in her mother's car and was watching from 20 yards away. Phone already raised. 3 cameras rolling, and Pruitt had barely even started. Pruitt ordered Marcus out of the vehicle. Marcus complied. He moved slowly, kept his hands visible at shoulder height, and stepped out of the SUV with the practiced deliberateness of a man who had given this exact instruction to dozens of suspects himself. He knew what compliant looked like. He was doing it perfectly. Pruitt ordered him to the rear of the vehicle and told him to put his hands on the trunk. Marcus did exactly that. "Officer, I want to inform you that I am a federal agent," Marcus said clearly. "My DEA credentials are in the inside left pocket of my jacket. May I reach for them?" Pruitt told him not to move. Then he told Marcus to take the jacket off. Marcus removed the jacket slowly, one arm at a time, and held it toward Pruitt. Pruitt didn't take it. Instead, he called dispatch and reported a suspicious individual who was, quote, becoming uncooperative and refusing to follow orders. Anyone who has since listened to that body camera audio knows that was a lie. Marcus had followed every instruction without hesitation. This was Pruitt's second mistake, and it was a significant one. Filing a false report would later become one of the federal charges against him. Pruitt then announced he was going to pat Marcus down. Marcus stated clearly, for the record, that he did not consent to a search of his person, that he was a federal law enforcement officer, and that he was asking again to be allowed to produce his credentials. Pruitt ignored him and conducted the pat-down anyway. Inside the dealership, Kevin Park had stopped filming on his phone and grabbed his work tablet, which had a better camera. He stepped closer to the window. Amara Webb had not approached. She had made the immediate, smart decision to stay back and keep recording. A couple exiting the dealership after a test drive stopped when they saw the confrontation and added 2 more phones to the documentation. An elderly man who had been sitting in his car waiting for his wife came out of his vehicle and walked closer to see what was happening. 5 separate recordings were now capturing Dale Pruitt conduct an illegal pat-down of a cooperating federal agent who had done nothing wrong. Have you or someone you know experienced something like this? Type yes in the comments if this scene feels familiar. Pruitt found Marcus's service weapon during the pat-down, a standard-issue SIG Sauer that Marcus was legally required to carry at all times as a DEA agent. The moment Pruitt's hand found it, everything escalated fast. Pruitt stepped back and drew his own weapon. Marcus kept his hands on the trunk and his voice absolutely level. He told Pruitt that he was a DEA agent, that the firearm was his service weapon, that he was legally licensed and required to carry it, and that his credentials were in the jacket that was sitting right there on the trunk. He told Pruitt that pointing a weapon at a federal officer who had broken no law was something he should think very carefully about. Amara Webb, 20 yards away, was trembling. She kept filming. Pruitt did not holster his weapon. He ordered Marcus to get on his knees on the asphalt. Marcus complied. On his knees, hands behind his head, in the parking lot of a car dealership on a Saturday morning, in front of his daughter, while 5 cameras recorded everything. This was Pruitt's 3rd mistake, and by far his worst. Detaining a federal officer at gunpoint without cause is not a departmental violation. It is a federal crime. 2 backup officers arrived within 4 minutes, Officers Denise Okafor and Brendan Lyle. They pulled up to a scene that did not look like anything Pruitt had described over radio. Pruitt had told dispatch he had a suspicious, armed individual who was non-compliant and potentially dangerous. What they found was a well-dressed man on his knees on the pavement, hands behind his head, completely still, surrounded by approximately 8 bystanders, several of whom were filming openly, while Pruitt stood over him with his sidearm drawn. Okafor was 15 years on the force. She had seen a lot of things. What she saw here set off every alarm she had. She walked over to Pruitt and asked quietly, through her teeth, what the basis for the stop was. Pruitt said the man had been loitering and was carrying a concealed weapon. At a car dealership? Okafor said. Pruitt said the man had been uncooperative. Okafor turned and looked at the man on his knees, who had his hands behind his head and was not moving. That look lasted a full 3 seconds. From the asphalt, Marcus stated his full name, his DEA badge number, his field office, and his supervisor's name. He asked again, for what was now the 4th time, to be allowed to produce his credentials from the jacket on the trunk. Okafor picked up the jacket. She handed it to Lyle. She told Marcus to walk her through exactly which pocket. He did. Lyle opened the jacket and found the DEA credentials immediately. Lyle looked at the badge. He looked at Pruitt. Then he held up the badge and said, "Dale, this man is a DEA agent." Pruitt stared at the badge for a long moment. He did not lower his weapon immediately. There was a pause, captured in excruciating detail on at least 3 of the cameras. That lasted approximately 4 seconds. 4 seconds where Dale Pruitt stood there with a gun pointed at a federal officer, holding the moment as if deciding what to do next. Okafor told him, quietly, but with unmistakable authority, to holster his weapon right now. Pruitt finally did. Do you think Pruitt knew exactly what he was doing from the very beginning? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Okafor got on her radio and asked dispatch to independently verify the credentials of Senior Special Agent Marcus Webb of the DEA Chicago field office. Within 45 seconds, dispatch confirmed. The credentials were valid, the agent was active duty and in good standing, and the service weapon was registered and authorized. The scene in that parking lot had now grown to about 15 people. Every phone was up. Okafor helped Marcus to his feet. She handed him his jacket. Her expression was professional and controlled, but her eyes said everything. Marcus stood up, put on his jacket, and straightened it with 2 deliberate pulls at the lapels. Then he looked at Dale Pruitt. Pruitt's face had gone through several phases in the past 90 seconds. Confusion, recognition, calculation, and now something that sat in the space between fear and defeat. The arrogance was gone. What was left wasn't quite remorse. It was closer to a man doing math and not liking the answer. He told Marcus he was free to go. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had just happened, just a cold dismissal, as if a black man had been forced to his knees on asphalt in front of his daughter for no reason. And now it was simply over. Marcus didn't move toward his car. He told Pruitt he would need his badge number, his supervisor's name, and the case number for the stop. Pruitt hesitated. Officers are legally required to provide this information when requested. His hesitation was captured on body cam, on Kevin Park's tablet, and on 2 bystander phones. Okafor provided the information before Pruitt did. Marcus wrote everything down in a small notebook he produced from his jacket. He asked Kevin Park for a copy of the dealership's security footage and was told it would be preserved and made available. He photographed Pruitt's patrol car, his badge, his nameplate, the surrounding area, and the position of the cameras. Then, Amara walked over. She was shaking, but her face was composed in the way that belongs to people who have learned composure from watching someone else practice it their whole lives. She took her father's hand. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," Marcus told her. He looked at her for a moment. "Let's go look at that car." And they walked into the dealership together. Dale Pruitt stood in the parking lot and watched them go. Okafor turned to Lyle. Neither of them said a word. Amara Webb posted the video that afternoon with a brief, precise caption describing what her father had done for a living for 17 years and what had just been done to him in a parking lot while she watched. By 9 p.m., it had 340,000 views. By the next morning, it had crossed 4 million. By Monday, it was everywhere. Kevin Park's footage from the dealership tablet gave the story an additional angle. It showed the full sweep of the lot, the growing crowd of witnesses, and the moment Pruitt refused to holster his weapon for 4 full seconds after being told his target was a federal agent. That 4-second hesitation became the clip that news programs played on a loop. The headline wrote itself: "Decorated DEA agent forced to his knees in car dealership parking lot." The story went international within 48 hours. Type "accountability" in the comments if you believe every officer involved in this should face real consequences. The Naperville Police Department released a statement Monday morning saying they were aware of the incident and had launched an internal investigation. Dale Pruitt was placed on administrative leave with pay pending the outcome. The statement used the phrase, "We take all concerns seriously." The public took one look at the footage and took that statement about as seriously as it deserved. The DEA released its own statement the following afternoon. It was short and direct. Senior Special Agent Marcus Webb had been unlawfully detained at gunpoint while conducting no law enforcement activity, and the agency was referring the matter to the Department of Justice for review. The DOJ's Civil Rights Division opened a formal investigation within 72 hours. Pruitt's personnel file was obtained through a Freedom of Information request within a week. What it showed was not a surprise to anyone paying attention. 9 complaints over 11 years. 8 of them involved black men. 6 involved stops or confrontations in predominantly white or affluent areas of the city. One complainant described being asked, "What are you doing here?" in a grocery store parking lot. Another described being followed through a neighborhood for 3 blocks before being stopped and asked for ID while walking. In both cases, the complaints were reviewed, counseling was noted, and nothing changed. The department had known who Dale Pruitt was for years. They had the receipts. They had simply chosen, again and again, to keep him on the street. 3 of the other complainants came forward publicly after the story broke. One of them, A 42-year-old high school principal named Derek Hawes described being stopped while sitting in his own driveway in a subdivision where he had lived for 6 years. He had filed a complaint. Nothing had been done. He had stopped believing anything would ever be done. Until now. Marcus Webb gave one interview to a national news program 8 days after the incident. He was measured, professional, and precise. He said he did not want to be the story. He said the story was what happened to black men in America who did not have a federal badge to produce, men who had done nothing wrong and had no credential that would save them from the moment an officer decided they didn't belong somewhere. He said he thought about those men constantly. He said he thought about his daughter. The interview was watched 11 million times in its first week. The Department of Justice completed its review and filed federal charges against Dale Pruitt 5 months after the incident. 3 counts: deprivation of rights under color of law, unlawful detention of a federal officer, and making false statements to law enforcement. Specifically, the false report he had filed with dispatch describing Marcus as non-compliant and dangerous. The false statements charge alone carried a potential sentence of 5 years. The civil rights charges could add another decade. Pruitt's union hired him a private defense attorney, a former prosecutor named Robert Geis, who had handled high-profile police misconduct cases before. Geis began with the standard framing. His client had made errors in judgment in a high-stress situation, had not acted with discriminatory intent, and had been responding to what he perceived as a potential threat. That argument did not survive contact with the evidence. Prosecutors played the body camera footage. They showed the jury exactly when Marcus first identified himself as a federal agent, 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the stop before anything escalated. They showed Pruitt filing the false dispatch report 40 seconds after that identification. They showed the pat-down being conducted after Marcus's explicit non-consent was stated on camera. They showed the 4-second hesitation after the badge was confirmed. Then, they put the personnel file in front of the jury. 9 complaints, 8 involving black men. A documented pattern going back to his 3rd year on the force. A supervisor's note from 2019 that actually used the phrase potential bias concerns. That note had resulted in 4 hours of additional sensitivity training. Then Pruitt went back to work. The defense tried to argue that each prior complaint had been individually investigated and resolved, meaning Pruitt had no unresolved disciplinary issues at the time of the incident. The prosecution's response was a single question to the jury. Resolved how? Counseling and refresher training. Every time. No suspension. No probation. No meaningful consequence. A pattern that was documented, reviewed, and permitted to continue. If you've stayed with this story this long, you already know that accountability is possible. Subscribe and share this video so more people see what happened here. Officer Denise Okafor testified for the prosecution. She described arriving on scene, observing that Marcus was fully compliant, and recognizing within 30 seconds that the situation Pruitt had described over radio did not match what she found. She testified that she had never seen a cooperating subject described as dangerous in any report she had filed or reviewed. Her testimony was quiet, factual, and devastating. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 40 minutes. They came back with guilty verdicts on all 3 counts. Pruitt showed no visible reaction. His attorney requested a brief recess. The judge denied it. Sentencing took place 6 weeks later. The judge read a statement before pronouncing sentence that acknowledged Pruitt's 11 years of service and then methodically dismantled any argument that those years should mitigate what he had done. He noted that the very authority granted to officers by the public was what made the abuse of that authority so serious. He noted the 4-second hesitation. He noted the false report. He noted the pattern, the sentence, 22 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release, a permanent ban from serving in any law enforcement capacity in any jurisdiction in the United States, and mandatory completion of a comprehensive bias and ethics program during his incarceration. Dale Pruitt 11-year veteran of the Naperville Police Department, was handcuffed in open court and let out. The city of Naperville separately settled a civil lawsuit filed by Marcus Webb and his family for $1.4 million. The settlement agreement included a requirement for the department to implement independent civilian oversight of officer complaints, a reformed early warning system for tracking complaint patterns, and 3 years of monitoring by a federal compliance officer. The taxpayers of Naperville, who had nothing to do with what Dale Pruitt did, would be paying for his choices for years. Dale Pruitt's law enforcement certification was permanently revoked by the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board 30 days after sentencing. He was 44 years old. He had a federal conviction on his record, a lifetime ban from the only profession he had ever known, and no path back to any of it. Not in Naperville, not in Illinois, not anywhere in the United States. The career he had built over 11 years was gone in a way that could not be appealed, reversed, or quietly recovered from in a different city under a different department. It was finished, completely and permanently. His pension was forfeited under the terms of his conviction. Everything he had accumulated across those 11 years, the retirement he had been working toward, the financial security he had expected, gone. Forfeited not because someone took it from him in anger, but because the law he had sworn to uphold said that is what happens when you betray it from the inside. The personal consequences extended far beyond the professional ones. His marriage did not survive the year following the incident. The sustained public attention, the criminal proceedings, the weight of what he had done and what it had cost. It was more than the relationship could hold. His children faced difficulties at school in the way that children always do when a parent's name becomes a headline people recognize. He had to leave the neighborhood where he had lived for 9 years, the community he had been part of, the neighbors who now knew exactly who he was and what he had done. He started over somewhere else, as a convicted felon in his mid-40s with no career, no pension, and no reputation left to protect. These were not consequences that Marcus Webb sought or celebrated. He never said a word publicly about what happened to Pruitt's personal life. They were simply the weight of choices that catch up with people eventually, whether in 4 seconds or 4 years. But Dale Pruitt was far from the only person who faced consequences for what happened in that parking lot. The Naperville Police Department did not emerge from this intact. The DOJ's pattern and practice review, triggered by the federal investigation, went deep. Investigators examined the department's complaint history, traffic stop data, use of force records, and disciplinary files going back 12 years. What they found was not the portrait of one rogue officer who had somehow slipped through every safeguard. What they found was a system, a functioning, deliberate system, that had repeatedly identified problematic behavior in Dale Pruitt and repeatedly chosen not to address it with any consequence that would actually change anything. 3 supervisors who had reviewed Pruitt's complaints over the years were disciplined. The sergeant who had written the 2019 internal note flagging potential bias concerns and then signed off on 4 hours of sensitivity training as the adequate response was demoted. 2 other supervisors who had reviewed separate complaints and taken no meaningful action were reassigned to non-supervisory positions, removed from any role that involved overseeing other officers. The chief of police announced his early retirement 4 months after the DOJ report was released publicly. He did not hold a press conference. He did not give interviews. The department was placed under a consent decree requiring 5 full years of federal monitoring. The terms were not optional and not negotiable. Comprehensive retraining on bias and constitutional policing. A completely reformed complaint system with independent civilian oversight that operated outside the department's control. Mandatory quarterly public reporting of traffic stop data broken down by race, location, and outcome. Every element of the decree was designed to make invisible patterns visible and to ensure that the next time a supervisor wrote a note about potential bias concerns, something more than a 4-hour training session would follow. Illinois state legislators moved quickly. A reform bill that had been sitting in committee for 2 years, stalled by lobbying and procedural delays, was advanced, debated, and passed within 13 months of the incident. The law established mandatory early intervention protocols for every police department in the state, requiring documented corrective action plans whenever an officer accumulated more than 3 complaints within any 24-month period. It was signed into law 14 months after that Saturday morning in the Prestige Motors parking lot. It now applies to every department in Illinois. Thousands of officers, hundreds of departments. One parking lot in Naperville started all of it. Marcus Webb returned to his work at the DEA. He did not seek a platform or position himself as a public figure. He accepted 3 invitations to speak at law enforcement training conferences in the year following the trial. And at each one, he spoke directly to the officers in the room about what that stop felt like from the inside of his car. Not as a federal agent, not as someone with credentials and authority, but as a black man sitting with his hands on the wheel while his daughter watched from 20 yards away and didn't know if her father was coming home. Those sessions, by every account from people who attended them, were not easy to sit through. They were not designed to be. Amara Webb got the car. A silver Honda Accord, clean mileage, good safety rating, exactly what her father had researched and selected for her. She drove it home that same afternoon, after the parking lot had cleared, after the statements had been taken, after Marcus had documented everything he needed to document. Father and daughter walked out of Prestige Motors together and drove away in separate cars. That was the day Marcus Webb had planned for months. In the end, despite everything, it happened exactly the way he intended. The story of what happened in that Naperville parking lot is not, at its core, about a federal agent. It is about what happens when a system decides that some people are allowed to be treated as suspects for no reason at all, and that the officers who do it will face nothing more serious than a strongly worded memo and a few hours of refresher training that changes absolutely nothing. Marcus Webb had 17 years of federal service, 2 commendations, a badge that confirmed every single word he said. He still ended up on his knees on the asphalt of a car dealership parking lot on a Saturday morning while his daughter stood 20 yards away and shook. Think about that. A man who had spent nearly 2 decades hunting cartel operatives, surviving undercover operations, and putting dangerous people behind bars, brought to his knees in public, in front of his child, by an officer who simply decided he didn't belong there. The question that matters, the one Marcus raised in his interview, and that stayed with people long after the news cycle moved on, is what happens to the men who don't have that badge. The ones who are stopped the same way, spoken to the same way, treated the same way, and left standing with nothing but their word against whatever an officer decides to write in his report. No credentials to produce, no federal agency to call, no viral video with 11 million views to force anyone's hand. The answer, for far too many of them, is nothing. No DOJ investigation, no consent decree, no $1.4 million settlement, no criminal charges, no conviction, no handcuffs in open court. Just a story they carry home and tell their sons about why you keep your hands visible, your voice low, and your frustration buried somewhere deep where it can't get you killed. That is the reality this case forced people to sit with. And it was uncomfortable. It was supposed to be. This case mattered because it proved accountability is possible when evidence exists, when witnesses refuse to look away, and when public pressure refuses to let institutions quietly close the file. Multiple cameras, multiple witnesses. A daughter who had the presence of mind to keep filming through her fear. A sales manager who grabbed a better device and stepped toward the window instead of away from it. Those choices made the difference between justice and silence. So document everything. You have the right to record. Use it. Bystanders who film are not troublemakers. They are the reason some stories end differently than they otherwise would. Dale Pruitt made one decision the moment he saw a black man sitting calmly in a parking lot and decided that picture didn't look right to him. Everything that followed, the illegal stop, the false report, the pat down, the drawn weapon, the 4 seconds of hesitation, was just that first decision playing itself out to its natural end. He thought he held all the power in that lot. He was wrong. And that single miscalculation destroyed everything he had. Justice is not guaranteed, but sometimes when the evidence is clear and the people refuse to stay quiet, it arrives exactly when and how it should. Thank you for watching until the very end. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it. More people need to see it. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment in this story that hit you hardest? I read every single one.